Boston University researchers reportedly developed a more lethal strain of the COVID virus. That was according to New York Post, and had many people wondering, why are they doing that? Please stop. Don't do it. I had that reaction. I was very upset about this. So I looked through the New York Post article, and I realized that so this was just based on, there was an underlying article from the Boston Herald, which was behind a paywall. So I was determined to read this to see if this was true. So I signed up for a Boston Herald. I paid like $1 for 6 months. It's not, don't be crying. I'll be starving because of the Boston Herald budget I have to set aside.
Drop your Cash App, Robby. the people want to support you in this intrepid journalism.
So I did some actual journalism, looked at the Boston Herald story, and it turns out that this headline is total BS.
Okay, what's going on?
So they actually made a strain of the virus that is less dangerous.
Okay.
Now, to be clear, this still could be bad, and I don't like all this tinkering with the virus being done anyway. What they did was take the Omicron strain and remove the spike protein and attach the Omicron spike, to the original COVID strain and then tried it on mice. These mice all got killed by the original strain. Then when you didn't bring the mice back to life, you got different mice. Tried out Omicron spike plus original. That only killed 80% of the mice. So I think the effort was to demonstrate whether the spike protein is actually the scary thing or whether there's something else. This research would suggest the spike protein wasn't actually making it more deadly. It was more deadly before for mice, whatever that means. So anyway, the headline is just false. They did not make a strain that was more deadly. They did make a different strain, and I was looking at Alina Chen is someone we've had on the show before. She's has a lot of expert things to say about lab leak and gain of function, et cetera. And she was like, it's important to read the underlying thing because this was totally taken out of context. She said, I'm still not super comfortable with the idea of them doing this kind of research anyway, because what if it spills out? What if you don't exactly know how it might mutate further, or something like that. But I thought it was worth. I wanted to talk about it since I bothered to look a little closer at it. I honestly think the fact that it was behind a paywall is what
enables
caused this.
Yeah. So how did? You read both of these articles. How do you think the Post got to this crazy, Frankenvirus, run, be afraid, it's Halloween? How do you think they got there from the initial post?
Yeah, I think they just didn't read the initial post very carefully at all.
Is this something that you see happening with some regularity in this subject area in particular?
I don't know if it's more prevalent in this subject matter than others, but lazy just re-upping someone else's post or just adding very little. This is what passes for journalism a lot of the time now, and I'm not immune to it. I've done it before, where you're not really chasing down your own leads necessarily. You see an article that you think is interesting, and maybe you add a little bit of commentary to it, and then you've posted your own version. Again, I do this. Everyone does this.
Back in the day when I was in high school, I did an internship at Science Magazine because I thought I wanted to be a science journalist, and that is really the issue with a lot of science journalism, is that somebody has to translate what's happening in these thick, dense research papers to the public, and a lot is often lost in the process, even under the best faith conditions. And I'm not sure that what we're looking at here in the Post is a good faith condition.
Sometimes we just don't have time. You and I talk about 8 or 10 stories a day.
Sure.
We only have so much time to look at them very closely. Often we select for stories we feel like we already know pretty well, or that we have interest in. So they're easier to talk about. But every now and then we have to tackle something that we don't know much about, but it's just very important.
Yeah.
I'm sure we get things wrong on occasion.
On very rare occasions.
Very rare occasions.
In other COVID news, U.S. health officials are already cautioning that the country could face a surge in COVID this winter. The new warning comes as the number of cases in Europe have trended upward late in the summer.
Data from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control shows the 7-day average is about 230,000 cases per day, while the 7-day average here in the U.S. is around 38,000. COVID is trending downward nationwide. Experts say that could change as cooler temperatures move in. So we would be expected probably to see some increases in at least certain parts of the country. The trajectory for the last several years, has been spikes in in warmer parts of the country, more southern parts of the country during the summer when people are more indoors because it's so hot there, and then which prompted a lot of every time because that happened first every time and prompted a lot of denunciation from the mainstream media for those states' policies.
Red state policies,
and then as the regional, the weather effects shifts, and then all the colder blue states go through the exact same thing, not exactly the same, but similar trajectories. Even though their policies are different, and there's no condemnation of them.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens this time around because we no longer have the ability to call up the Biden administration and get our free tests.
You can call me up. I've got a whole stockpile.
Well, not having them as readily on hand, I think will affect people. I mean, even if you can afford to get them, I can feel it in myself. Like, it was easy for me to hop on the internet and press the button and have the test delivered. Me getting up and going, it was,
It's easier than going to CVS?
I can't tell you the last time I stepped foot in a CVS. It's been
really?
at least a couple of weeks. Yeah.
I go to CVS like multiple times a day.
Okay. all I'm saying is, I do think it's going to, how much people know that they have COVID is going to be affected by how much people are testing, which is going to be affected by how much people are required to test in a professional setting or whether or not they have the test easily available at home. And that's not a value judgment about, policies. That's just to say, I think that there's going to be some real effects on how we can even interpret how serious the spike is in the fall because of decisions that have been made at the top. And I've been, pretty consistent about really wishing that some of the non-mandate related interventions were carried through. And I'm concerned that people are now being left to their own devices and given very little support from the government, whether it's in the form of better ventilation for people going back indoors. The outdoor dining is going to move back indoors in its entirety without having this kind of bifurcated world we get to live in the summer and warmer months. And, it's any man's guess what's going to happen.
Last year in I think it wasn't just fall, but really, December and January, most December here in DC was when absolutely everyone I knew got it. It felt like the entire city contracted it. Now, that would suggest perhaps places that were very hit hard by Omicron, maybe they have some kind of residual immunity, although I think now we've heard from people who've gotten Omicron and then have gotten it again fairly quickly afterward, and so a year later, maybe that's not doing much.
And the compounding effects, I think just as people are concerned about what the compounding effects of getting boosters for the rest of your life are, doctors have been very clear about the compounding effects of getting COVID multiple times. And I think you're going to see more cases of long COVID and some of these other things that the government is also not at all prepared to deal with. We're concerned about inflation, and people are talking about quiet quitting and how that's driving this crisis. But some other folks have pushed back and said that part of what's going on here is a lot of long-term disability that is not being registered in the way that it should be registered. So
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I've already, by the way, heard from several people who've said, I feel like it's a little tickle in the back of my throat, but I don't have any tests. I'm not going to test. Like, there's no point.
Yeah, people are treating it, more people I know are treating it just like any other illness. And
especially because the consequences for their employment for testing and testing positive, not having paid leave, not being able to take the time off, it's not worth the risk for them, it's just setting up some really perverse incentives. So, we'll see what happens. That's it for today. But be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any video from Rising.
And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can check us out on Roku, on Vizio, and on Plex TV. And we will both be back here tomorrow, and hope you will be as well. Goodbye.
See ya.